if you were one of the lucky few who managed to watch the first video I ever uploaded to this channel, before I made it unlisted because it was absolute crap, you would know that I'm a fan of the original Doom. Now, imagine to my surprise when John Romero, one of the lead designers behind the game, released his first level in over 21 years. Considered by Romero to be a remake of E1M8, the map completely revamps the layout and design of the level to the point where, aside from the boss fight and the music, it no longer resembles the original at all. What follows is an overview of the map, and a comparison of how it compares to the original. The first thing that you'll notice when you boot up the map is that it's completely different to the original. Here is a comparison of the opening rooms, both from the original E1M8 and Romero's version, which is creatively dubbed E1M8b. The difference between these maps can be seen to be even vaster when viewed from a top-down perspective. From this, it can be seen that E1M8b is significantly larger than its counterpart. For comparison, if the player rushes through the original version, even on their first time playing the map, they can probably reach the Barrens of Hell within less than a minute, while the new version can take the player upwards of 30 minutes if they don't know what they're doing. The only similarity between the two maps is really just the boss fight with the Barrens of Hell at the end of the level, both of which manage to provide an intense end to both maps. Even this area has been completely overhauled, as both the arena and the enemies that support the boss are completely different. The core aesthetics of the level have been changed in the new version as well, with far more detail being present in E1M8b than the majority of vanilla Doom levels. The level features numerous cracks on the floor, detailed pillars, and creative uneven ground in outside areas that really make it different from the original game. Compared to the simple straight shot level design of the original map, Romero's new map features multiple paths that extend as spokes off the main thoroughfares that gradually become unlocked as the player progresses. In a strange way, it's kinda similar to Resident Evil. When the player reaches the end of a spoke where a keycard is likely located, the new paths are revealed that funnel the player back to an earlier point of the level, which effectively minimizes backtracking and keeps the flow of the level consistent. The player can then be free to explore a new branch with the keycard that they've found. Many of the earlier parts in the level also allow the player to see later parts, giving the player both an opportunity to thin out some of the enemy's numbers, but also gain a sense of progression and space for where they are in the level. Playing through the level, it feels far more like the compact yet branching level design from the original game, rather than the open and blocky levels with just enemies strewn about the place that Doom 2 brought to the table. Considering I'm one of those weird people that think Doom has better level design than its sequel, this sort of complex yet understandable level design really appeals to me. Because the level takes the E1M8 level slot, Romero has decided to limit himself to the weapon and enemy palette of the shareware version of Doom, and I feel that this has worked wonders. Not only does this make sense in terms of where the level takes place with the rest of the levels in the episode, it also means that he's managed to use a smaller weapon pool and smaller enemy palette without making the experience duller. Often I find that someone who limits themselves will be able to create something far more interesting than if they had everything that was available to them, and I think it's worked in this case. Each area of the level is very cleverly used with the small amounts of enemies and weapons that are available. For both playthroughs of these levels, I decided to start with just a pistol on Ultraviolence, which means that these levels have a very different difficulty curve than they would if they were played at the conclusion of the Knee Deep in the Dead episode. I make direct mention of this because the first room in E1M8b is considerably harder than any start in the official maps. While this may be simply due to me not being completely familiar with the map, I feel that the pistol start on this may be just a bit harder than it was intended. As you can see from this footage, the level presents you with what seems like a fairly easy scenario, a single imp and a zombie man facing away from the player. However, the evilness starts to become apparent when the player begins to engage these bad guys. Instantly, numerous demons begin to teleport into the room and rush the player. Even if the player decides to go for the nearby shotgun to increase their odds, they are likely to take damage from these red cracks in the floor and then be shot apart by the shotgun guy who appears in the wall above the weapon. If the player instead tries to move into the adjacent room, they'll likely take more damage from the cracks in the floor, and then begin to run into even bigger groups of enemies. However, once the player manages to get past this initial encounter, the rest of the level feels far more fair and interesting. Throughout the level, the player faces everything from multiple ambushes around important items to straight up circle strafing in outdoor areas to compact halls and flanking enemies. One area that I particularly liked was this one here, where as the player progressed through these hallways, small rooms of monsters would open up a moderate distance behind the player, which caused constant pressure to be applied from multiple directions. While none of the level is as difficult as the starting room, the level is also no cakewalk. At no point did I feel that I had enough health or armor to be completely safe, and was kept constantly on my toes. It seems as though health and ammo aren't placed anywhere near as liberally as they are in other id maps, and I don't ever recall maxing out my stats at any point, which happened fairly regularly in the vanilla game. However, Romero seems to have struck an excellent balance between the amount of health and ammo the player is given compared to what they'll be facing. While I never maxed out my supplies, I never felt like I had too little either, which made the majority of the level feel really fair. Overall, I'd say that E1M8b is one of the most creative, interesting, and fun Doom levels that are out there, and it shows that Romero has not lost his touch in the 21 years since his last level for Doom. I would strongly recommend anyone and everyone who has a copy of Doom to try this one out. Let's be real here, who doesn't have a copy of Doom? So go out and get it. It's easily available, and I'll link it in the description for you. And it's one of the most fun standalone FPS levels to have come out in a long time.